The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat above the dusty bar on the edge of Route 66, casting erratic shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. It was just past midnight, in the forgotten stretch of Nevada desert, where the wind howled through the canyons like a lonesome wolf, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and regret. Inside, the air hung heavy with the tang of stale beer and cigarette smoke, the kind that clung to your clothes and soul long after you left. Sophia wiped down the scarred wooden counter for the umpteenth time that night, her hands moving in mechanical rhythm, calluses etched from years of silent endurance. She was 32, with eyes like storm clouds, grey and unyielding, and a faint scar tracing her jawline, a whisper from a life she'd buried deep. The door creaked open, letting in a gust of hot night air, and he walked in. Ethan Hawk Harlan, though most folks just called him Hawk. He was a towering figure at 6'4", broad-shouldered and weathered by the road, his leather cut patched with the emblem of the Iron Vipers, a coiled serpent over crossed pistons. His beard was streaked with silver, and his eyes, sharp as flint, scanned the room before settling on the empty stool at the far end of the bar. 5 years. That's how long he'd been coming here, every Friday night like clockwork, parking his rumbling Harley outside under the stars. He'd order the same thing, a double whiskey, neat. No words beyond that, no stories, just the clink of ice in the glass and the low hum of classic rock from the jukebox. Sophia poured it without looking up, sliding the glass his way. Their ritual was unspoken, a fragile thread in the chaos of her shifts. She'd watch him from the corner of her eye as he nursed the drink, staring into the amber liquid like it held answers to questions no one dared ask. Hawk was a ghost of a man, haunted by the ghosts he rode with. The Vipers weren't just a club, they were his chosen family, forged in the fires of old wars and broken oaths. But tonight, something was different. The bar was emptier than usual, the regulars scattered by a storm warning that never quite materialized. Only a couple of truckers, hunched over their beers in the corner, their laughter hollow against the walls. As the clock ticked toward 1 a.m., the door burst open again, this time with violence. 3 men stumbled in, reeking of cheap cologne and cheaper intentions. They were locals, roughnecks from the nearby oil fields, faces flushed with liquor and bravado. The leader, a burly guy with a shaved head and a tattoo snaking up his neck, slammed a fist on the counter. "Give me 3 shots, sweetheart, and make 'em quick." His eyes raked over Sophia, lingering too long, a smirk twisting his lips. She ignored it, pouring the shots with steady hands, but her pulse quickened. These weren't the harmless drunks. There was a meanness in their postures, the kind that escalated fast in a place like this. Hawk didn't move at first, his fingers wrapped around his glass, knuckles whitening. But when the leader leaned too close, his breath hot and sour as he muttered something crude about what he'd do after closing time, Hawk's stool scraped back like thunder. The room went still. He rose slowly, his boots thudding against the floor, the chains on his belt jingling softly. "You got a problem, friend?" Hawk's voice was low, gravelly, carrying the weight of miles and memories. The men turned, sizing him up, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. Hawk wasn't young anymore, mid-40s with lines carved deep from sun and sorrow, but he moved like a predator, deliberate and unhurried. The leader laughed, but it came out forced. "Mind your business, old man. This ain't your fight." He shoved at Hawk's shoulder, a mistake that echoed in the sudden hush. Hawk caught the hand mid-air, twisting just enough to make the man wince. "It is now. No shout, no fury, just calm authority, the kind earned from staring down worse than this." The other 2 lunged, chairs toppling, but Hawk was ready. He sidestepped the first swing, his fist connecting with a solid thud against a jaw, sending the man sprawling into a table. The second grabbed a bottle, but Sophia's cry cut through. "Stop!" And Hawk pivoted, disarming him with a swift elbow to the gut. It was over in seconds, the trio scrambling out the door, tails between their legs, curses fading into the night. Sophia stood frozen behind the counter, her heart pounding like a war drum. She'd seen fights before, patched up the aftermath more times than she cared to count. But this was different. Hawk straightened his cut, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip, and met her gaze. For the first time in 5 years, his eyes held something beyond the whiskey's haze, recognition maybe, or the ghost of a promise long dormant. "You all right?" he asked, voice softer now, like the rumble of an engine idling down. She nodded, swallowing hard, her hands trembling as she reached for a rag. "Yeah, thanks." The words felt foreign, breaking the silence they'd built. The jukebox kicked in with a slow blues number, the guitar weeping in the dim light. Hawk didn't sit back down. Instead, he leaned on the counter, close enough that she could smell the leather and road dust on him. "Sophia," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like he'd been waiting to say it. She blinked. How did he know? 5 years of nods and paws, and he'd never asked. But he had noticed, in his quiet way, the name tag faded on her shirt, the way she moved like someone carrying invisible chains. "I've been coming here a long time," he continued, his voice steady against the storm outside, picking up. Rain began to patter on the tin roof, a rhythmic underscore to the moment. "Seen your handle worse than those fools, but tonight felt like it was time to say something." He paused, glancing at the empty glasses, the bar's flickering lights reflecting in his eyes. Sophia's mind raced. 5 years of her life poured into this place, escaping a past that clawed at her heels. A bad marriage, a sister lost to the streets, debts that never quite cleared. She'd built walls higher than the desert mesas, serving strangers to forget her own story. But Hawk, he was no stranger anymore. The rain intensified, thunder rolling distant like Harleys on the horizon. Sophia wiped her hands, meeting his stare. "What do you want to say, then?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, laced with the weariness of too many unspoken nights. Hawk's expression softened, the lines around his eyes deepening with old pain. He'd lost his own anchors years ago, a brother in arms to a senseless war, a promise to protect that he'd failed. The vipers had pulled him from the abyss, but the road always led back to loose ends. "Come home with me," he said simply, the words hanging in the air like smoke. Not a command, not a plea, just an invitation, raw and real, born from the silence they'd shared. Sophia's breath caught. The bar felt smaller, the world outside vast and unforgiving. She thought of the empty apartment waiting for her, the echo of loneliness. And him, Hawk, with his scars and his steady gaze, offering a bridge to something more. The whiskey glass between them gleamed under the neon, a symbol of all the words unsaid. In that moment, as lightning cracked the sky, she felt the first stir of possibility, a promise awakening in the desert night. The rain hammered the bar's tin roof like 1,000 impatient fingers, turning the desert night into a blurred watercolor of red taillights and shadowed mesas. Sophia stood there, the rag limp in her hand, Hawk's words echoing in the space between them. "Come home with me." It wasn't a question, but it hung like one, fragile against the storm's fury. Her grey eyes searched his face, tracing the silver in his beard, the faint scar above his brow that spoke of roads rougher than this Nevada stretch. 5 years of pouring his whiskey, of stealing glances at the iron viper's patch on his cut, and now this, a crack in the routine, wide enough to let in the unknown. She set the rag down, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Home? You don't even know me, Hawk." The name felt intimate on her lips, pulled from overheard whispers of the regulars who'd seen him ride in with his crew. He nodded slowly, leaning back against the counter, the leather of his jacket creaking like old saddle. The jukebox had gone silent, leaving only the rain and the distant rumble of thunder chasing echoes across the canyons. I know enough, seen you here night after night, holding this place together while it tries to pull you under. That's not living, Sophia, that's surviving. Outside, lightning forked the sky, illuminating the parking lot where his Harley sat like a faithful steed, rain sluicing off its chrome in silver sheets. Sophia's mind flashed to her own life, the cramped apartment above a laundromat in town, walls thin as promises, filled with the ghosts of what she'd left behind. A marriage that had soured like bad moonshine, leaving her with bruises that faded but never fully healed. Her sister Mia, lost to the streets years ago, a phone call in the dead of night that ended with silence on the line. Debts from medical bills after a car wreck that took their parents, chaining her to this bar like an anchor in sand. She'd come to Nevada to escape, to bury the pain under layers of small talk and spilled drinks. But Hawk, he'd been a constant, a quiet anchor in the storm. He didn't push, just watched her with those flint-sharp eyes, the kind that had stared down highways from sea to shining sea. The Vipers weren't outlaws in the movies. They were brothers bound by oaths older than the club itself, promises made in foxholes and hospital beds to watch each other's backs when the world turned its face away. Hawk had joined after the war, after losing his blood brother to a roadside bomb in some forgotten corner of the world. The road had become his redemption, each mile a step toward honoring the vow he'd made over a grave, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Coming to this bar had started as habit, a pit stop on the way to nowhere. But Sophia, she'd become the reason he lingered. The door creaked again, but it was just the wind, rattling the frame like an uninvited guest. Sophia glanced at the clock, closing time, the hands mocking her hesitation. "What makes you think I'd go anywhere with you?" she asked, crossing her arms, the faint scar on her jaw catching the neon glow. It was from that night with her ex, a shove too hard against the kitchen counter, but she wore it like a badge now, a reminder of the strength she'd clawed back. Hawk's lips curved in a half-smile, not mocking but knowing. "Because I've got a place up in the hills, away from this dust and noise. Nothing fancy, a cabin with a view of the stars, room for more than one soul. And because tonight those fools reminded me why I ride, you deserve better than scraping by in the shadows." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn keychain, the metal warm from his hand. On it dangled a small silver locket, engraved with a simple viper coiled around a heart. "This was my brother's. He made me promise to look out for the lost ones. You've been lost long enough." Sophia's throat tightened, the weight of unspoken years pressing down. She thought of Mia again, the last words they'd shared, a tearful plea over a payphone. "Find your way, Soph. Don't end up like me." The streets had claimed her sister, whispers of bad crowds and worse choices, but no body ever found, just echoes in police reports she'd chased until they went cold. Sophia had promised herself she'd never need saving, that independence was her armor. But here was Hawk, offering not chains, but wings, leather and chrome, freedom wrapped in loyalty. The rain eased to a drizzle, the storm moving on like a bad memory. She wiped the counter one last time, the motion automatic, then untied her apron, folding it neatly. "Just tonight," she said finally, her voice a whisper against the quiet. "To see what home looks like for a man like you." Hawk nodded, no triumph in his eyes, just quiet relief. He held the door open, the cool night air rushing in, carrying the scent of wet earth and possibility. They stepped out together, the gravel crunching under her boots as she followed him to the Harley. The engine roared to life with a throaty growl, vibrating through her bones like a heartbeat long dormant. She climbed on behind him, her arms tentative around his waist, the warmth of him seeping through the leather. As they pulled onto the rain-slicked road, the bar's neon faded in the rear view, a dying light swallowed by the dark. The desert stretched endless before them, stars piercing the clouds like promises kept. Miles blurred into the night, the wind whipping her hair, tearing at the walls she'd built. Hawk rode steady, his presence a solid anchor against the speed. Conversation came in fragments, shouted over the engine, bits of his past, the Viper's code of honor, how the club had become his family after the war stole everything else. "We don't take what's not ours," he said at one stop, under a canopy of Joshua trees. "But we give what's needed. Loyalty's the only currency that lasts." Sophia shared fragments too, the words tumbling out like rain, her sister's disappearance, the ache of broken vows in her marriage. The bar as a cage she'd rattled but never escaped. By the time the cabin came into view, perched on a ridge overlooking the valley, dawn was brushing the horizon in soft pinks. It was simple. Weathered wood, a porch swing creaking in the breeze, smoke curling from a stone chimney. Inside, the air smelled of pine and coffee, walls lined with photos of the Vipers, grinning faces around campfires, Harleys lined up like soldiers. Hawk poured her a mug, black and strong, the steam rising like morning mist. They sat at the kitchen table, the silence comfortable now, not heavy. "This could be more than tonight," he said softly, his hand brushing hers. Sophia looked out the window, the sun cresting the hills, gilding the world in gold. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter, a promise stirring, not of perfection but of partnership, of chosen paths winding toward redemption. But as the morning light grew, a distant rumble echoed, not thunder, but engines. Hawk's brow furrowed, stepping to the window. The Vipers were coming, a convoy cutting through the dawn, drawn by some unspoken call. Trouble, perhaps, from the bar's shadows, or something deeper tied to old oaths. Sophia's heart quickened. Whatever lay ahead, she wasn't facing it alone anymore. The road had led her here, and for now, that was enough. The sun climbed higher over the ridge, painting the cabin's wooden planks in warm amber hues, but the rumble of engines grew louder, vibrating through the valley like an approaching storm. Sophia gripped her coffee mug tighter, the porcelain hot against her palms, as Hawk pushed open the screen door and stepped onto the porch. The air was crisp with the scent of damp pine and wild sage, the night's rain leaving the earth glistening under the morning light. She followed him out, her boots soft on the creaking boards, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant growl. From the kitchen window she'd seen them, a line of Harleys snaking up the dirt road, chrome flashing like blades in the dawn. Hawk shaded his eyes with a calloused hand, his broad frame silhouetted against the rising sun. "That's Jax and the boys," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Jax was his road captain. A wiry veteran with a laugh like gravel and eyes that missed nothing, another Viper pulled from the wreckage of old battles, bound by the same unbreakable oaths. The convoy slowed as it crested the hill, engines cutting to a low idle, dust swirling in lazy spirals around the bikes. There were 7 of them, leather cuts gleaming with the serpent emblem, faces etched with the miles they'd shared. No one dismounted right away. They waited, engines purring like watchful beasts, giving Hawk the space to signal all clear. Sophia stood beside him, arms crossed against the chill that lingered in her bones despite the warming day. The Viper's arrival felt like an intrusion into this fragile new beginning, yet there was a pull to it, a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. Hawk glanced at her, his flint eyes softening. "Their family," he said simply, as if that explained the thunder in their wake. Word must have spread from the bar. Those roughnecks last night. They got ties to some bad elements out here. Oil barons with deep pockets and deeper grudges. The lead bike pulled forward, Jax killing the engine with a flick of his wrist. He swung off, boots hitting the ground with a thud, his salt and pepper hair tied back under a bandana. "Hawk," he greeted, nodding to Sophia with a respectful tilt. "Heard you stirred up the hornet's nest. Barmaid said you clocked 3 of Harlan's crew, left 'em running like coyotes." His voice carried the easy cadence of men who'd stared down worse than bar fights. But there was an undercurrent of concern, eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting shadows to rise from the mazes. Hawk leaned against the porch rail, the wood groaning under his weight. "Wasn't looking for trouble, brother, but it found its way." He recounted the night in clipped tones, the crude advances, the shove, the swift end to it all, omitting the part where he'd finally spoken to Sophia after 5 silent years. The Vipers listened, clustered now on the gravel drive, their bikes forming a protective semicircle. Among them was Lena, the only woman in the core group, a former nurse who'd patched up more than her share of road rash and bullet holes. Her dark hair was cropped short, and she wore the Viper patch with the same quiet authority as the men, her presence a testament to the club's unspoken code. Loyalty over blood, strength in the chosen. Sophia felt their gazes on her, not judgmental, but appraising, like she was a puzzle piece they'd been waiting to see fit. Lena stepped forward, offering a hand. "Name's Lena. You the one who held the fort while our boys' heroics played out?" Her grip was firm, calloused from wrenching engines as much as bandaging wounds. Sophia nodded, surprised by the warmth in the woman's smile. "Sophia, and yeah, I've poured enough whiskey to know when to duck." The group chuckled, the tension easing like fog burning off under the sun. Jax pulled a crumpled map from his saddlebag, spreading it on the hood of a nearby truck, Hawk's old Ford, weathered from hauls across state lines. "Those 3 you tangled with? They're muscle for Victor Kane, runs the rigs out by Black Mesa. Word is, he's been squeezing locals, extortion dressed up as protection. Your bar scrap hit too close. He's got ears everywhere." The map showed scribbled lines, routes marked in red ink, circling the bar and extending to the oil fields 10 miles east. Kane's name evoked a chill. Sophia had heard whispers in the bar, tales of families ruined, debts called in with threats that left marks deeper than bruises. Hawk's jaw tightened, the silver in his beard catching the light like frost. Kane's shadow loomed larger than local thuggery. It tied back to old Viper business, a promise from years past. During the war, Hawk and Jax had crossed paths with a supply runner who turned state's evidence, selling out brothers for a cut of black market fuel deals. Kane was his nephew, blood turned poison, carrying grudges that festered like untreated wounds. "We made an oath back then," Hawk said, voice low, tracing a finger along the map. "No loose ends. Protect the innocent, stand against the corrupt. If he's coming for the bar or her, we ride." Sophia watched the exchange, the easy shorthand of men who'd forged bonds in fire. It stirred something in her, an echo of her own lost promises, to Mia, to the family she'd pieced together before it shattered. The Vipers weren't just riders, they were guardians, their leathers a shield against a world that chewed up the vulnerable. Lena caught her eye, nodding subtly. "We don't leave our own behind, ever." As the sun beat down, turning the air thick with the scent of heated metal and earth, the group planned in murmurs, scouts to the bar, eyes on Kane's rigs, a show of presence to deter without drawing badges. Sophia contributed little at first, but when Jax mentioned checking her apartment for tails, she spoke up. "It's above the laundromat on Elm. Nothing there worth chasing, but my sister's things. If they're digging, they might use it." The words slipped out, raw, pulling the group's focus. Hawk's hand rested on her shoulder, a steady weight that grounded her. By midday, the Vipers mounted up, engines roaring back to life in a symphony of power and unity. Dust billowed as they peeled out, heading toward town, leaving Hawk and Sophia in the cabins quiet. She turned to him, the map still open on the table inside, its lines like veins pulsing with impending conflict. "This your life? Oaths and roads that never end?" He poured fresh coffee, the steam curling like unspoken fears. "It's ours now, if you want it. Promises kept. That's what holds us together." Outside, The valley hummed with life, birds wheeling against the endless blue. But in the distance, a faint plume of dust rose from the east, a harbinger of the storm Cain's grudge would unleash. Sophia felt the pull of it, not fear, but resolve, a chance to honor her own buried vows, side by side with this man who'd seen her through the silence. The day stretched ahead, heavy with choices, but for the first time, the horizon felt like home. The afternoon sun hung heavy over the valley, turning the cabin's shadow into a long, jagged finger, pointing toward the encroaching dust plume from the east. Sophia stood at the kitchen window, the coffee in her mug gone cold, watching as Hawk paced the porch like a sentinel. The map lay forgotten on the table, its red lines bleeding into the wood grain, a reminder of the web tightening around them. Victor Cain's name lingered in the air like exhaust fumes, sour and inescapable. Hawk had shared more over the fresh brew, how Cain's uncle had betrayed their unit overseas, trading intel for oil contracts that left good men in unmarked graves. The grudge was personal, a festering wound that Cain wielded like a blade. Cutting through the innocent to reach old enemies, Hawk's phone buzzed on the rail, Jax's voice crackling through the speaker like gravel under tires. "We're at the bar, brother. Place is quiet, but eyes on us. Cain's boys are circling. Saw a black SUV idling by the pumps. No moves yet, but they're sniffing." Sophia's pulse quickened. The bar was her cage, but it held pieces of her life she couldn't abandon. Her locker there contained the last photo of Mia, faded and creased, tucked away like a secret shame. If Cain's crew rummaged through her things, they'd find more than dust, journals scribbled with half-formed pleas, addresses from the trail she'd followed after her sister's disappearance. "We head to her place next," Jax continued, the wind whipping his words. "Elm Street Laundromat. You want us to wait?" Hawk glanced at Sophia, his eyes holding hers through the screen door, a silent question in the furrow of his brow. She shook her head, stepping out into the heat that shimmered off the ridge. "No, I'm coming. If they're after me, better they see I'm not alone." Her voice carried a resolve she'd forgotten she had. Born from years of pouring drinks while nursing silent fears. Hawk nodded, pride flickering in his gaze like sunlight on chrome. "Ride with me, we'll meet 'em there." The Harley thrummed to life beneath them, a beast awakening as they descended the winding dirt path, gravel spitting in protest. Sophia clung to Hawk's waist, the vibration travelling up her spine, sinking with the beat of her heart. The desert unfolded in vast strokes, cacti standing sentinel, the horizon a hazy promise of confrontation. They hit the blacktop, the wind tearing at her hair, carrying whispers of sage and sun-baked earth. Town emerged like a mirage, faded storefronts, the laundromat's sign peeling in the breeze, washers humming faintly through the open door. The Vipers were already there, bikes lined up like iron guardians. Jax leaning against his with arms crossed, Lena scanning the alley with sharp eyes. Hawk killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant hum of traffic from the highway. "Clear?" he asked, dismounting with a fluid grace that belied his size. Jax straightened, tipping his chin toward the stairs at the building's side. "So far. But that SUV peeled out when we rolled up. They're close." Sophia led the way, her keys jingling like nervous laughter in the still air. The stairs creaked under their boots, each step echoing her rising dread. Her apartment was a single room above the din of spinning cycles, peeling wallpaper, a sagging bed, a kitchenette cluttered with takeout boxes. It smelled of detergent and loneliness, the kind that seeped into your skin. She unlocked the door, pushing it open to a space unchanged since the night before. Bed unmade, a half-read book on the nightstand. But something felt off, the air too still, a drawer in the dresser slightly ajar. Lena moved first, her nurse's instincts kicking in as she checked corners, while Jax peered out the window overlooking the alley. They've been here, Sophia said, voice tight, kneeling by the dresser. Her journals were gone, the ones with Mia's scrawled notes from frantic calls, leads on a shelter in Reno, a boyfriend with ties to shady crews. In their place, a single sheet of paper, typed and anonymous. Stay out of Kane's fields, or your sister's ghost comes calling. The words hit like a gut punch, Mia's absence a fresh wound. Hawk's hand on her shoulder was steady, grounding. This ends now. No more shadows. He crumpled the note, his jaw set like forged steel. The vipers gathered, the room shrinking under their presence, loyalty a tangible force, oaths humming in the space between them. Jax radioed the others outside. We've got confirmation. Kane's playing dirty. Time to pay a visit to those rigs. But Sophia held up a hand, her grey eyes fierce. Not with fists. I know the bar owner, old-timer named Gus. He owes me for covering shifts. If we go to him, get him to talk to the sheriff about protection rackets, it could shut this down clean. No blood, just truth. The group paused, the idea hanging like dust motes in the sunlight slanting through the blinds. Hawk searched her face, seeing the moral compass she'd hidden behind bar rags, the same one that had kept her serving through storms. You're right, he said finally, voice low with respect. Oaths aren't just for the road. They're for doing it right. Lena nodded, pocketing the note as evidence. I'll back you with what I've seen. Families pushed to the edge by Kane's games. Nurses hear the stories in ERs. The ones badges ignore. They filed out, the stairs groaning in relief, mounting up as the sun dipped toward the mesas, casting long shadows over Elm Street. Engines roared in unison, a convoy cutting through town toward Gus's office behind the bar. A squat building with blinds drawn against the glare. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and paperwork. Gus hunched over his desk, face like weathered leather. Sophia laid it out plain, the threats, the break-in, Kane's reach into her past. The old man listened, eyes widening at the viper patches, but her words, the plea for justice without vengeance, struck home. I've turned a blind eye too long, he admitted, rubbing his chin. Sheriff's in my pocket for this. We'll file reports, call in the state if needed. No more squeezing. As they stepped back into the fading light, the weight lifted slightly, the horizon clearing like a road after rain. But the distant rumble returned. Not vipers, but Kane's rigs, engines growling from the fields like a challenge unmet. Hawk squeezed Sophia's hand, the silver locket from his keychain glinting in the twilight. One step toward keeping promises, he murmured. The convoy formed up, heading back to the cabin under a sky streaked with fire, the desert whispering of battles won through words, not war. Sophia rode with her head high, the wind carrying her forward toward a redemption woven from loyalty's unbreakable thread. If this tale of quiet courage is stirring something in you, hit that like button below. It helps these stories reach more riders on the road. Twilight deepened over the desert like spilled ink, the cabin's lanterns flickering to life against the encroaching dusk, casting golden pools on the porch, where Hawk and Sophia sat side by side. The air hummed with the low buzz of crickets, punctuated by the occasional hoot of an owl hidden in the Joshua trees. The day's victories felt tentative, like a truce in a bar brawl. Gus's promise to the sheriff a thin shield against Kane's encroaching shadow. Sophia traced the grain of the wooden rail with her fingertip, the rough texture grounding her as memories of Mia surfaced unbidden, a laugh shared under summer stars, a whispered vow to always find each other, no matter the miles. Hawk's presence beside her was a quiet bulwark, his broad shoulders relaxed but alert, the scent of leather and faint engine oil mingling with the evening's cooling sage. He'd shared more as they rode back, fragments of his own fractured past, the war's echo in nightmares, the viper oath sworn over a brother's grave. We stand for the forgotten, ride against the tide that drowns them. It mirrored her own buried promise to Mia, the one she'd let atrophy in the grind of bar shifts and unpaid bills. Now, with the club's loyalty wrapping around her like a second skin, that vow stirred, demanding action. A low rumble shattered the peace, not the familiar viper growl, but something heavier, trucks, their engines laboring up the ridge road like beasts hauling burdens too great. Hawk rose fluidly, his hand instinctively reaching for the pistol tucked in his belt, though he didn't draw it. Sophia's heart clenched, the note from her apartment burning in her memory like a brand. Headlights pierced the gloom, two rigs cresting the hill, flanked by a pair of motorcycles that screamed Kane's crew, blacked-out Harleys with no patches, riders hunched like predators scenting blood. The trucks halted in a spray of gravel, doors slamming with finality. Victor Kane stepped out first, a man in his late 30s with a sharp suit, ill-suited to the dust. His face a mask of calculated calm, eyes like polished obsidian reflecting the lantern light. Flanking him were the three from the bar, bruises blooming purple on their jaws, smirks twisted into grimaces of payback. No weapons visible, but the threat hung thick, the air electric with unspoken menace. "Harlan," Kane drawled, his voice smooth as oil slick, stepping forward with hands open in mock peace. "Heard you've been meddling in family business." Hawk didn't budge, his stance wide, boots planted like roots in the earth. "This ain't about family, Kane. It's about your poison spreading where it don't belong." The words carried the weight of old battlefields, the betrayal of Kane's uncle still a raw nerve after all these years. Sophia stood too, her grey eyes locked on Kane, searching for any flicker of humanity in the man who'd turned her past into leverage. The note's threat echoed, Mia's ghost, but she held her ground. The viper's earlier resolve steeling her spine. Kane's gaze slid to her, lingering with a predator's appraisal. "And you, bar girl, pouring drinks for ghosts while chasing shadows of your sister. Mia, wasn't it? Streets eat folks like her, but I could help you forget. For a price." His words slithered, probing for weakness, but Sophia felt Hawk's subtle shift closer. A wall of leather and loyalty. The roughneck shifted uneasily, one rubbing his jaw, the memory of Hawk's fists fresh. Kane raised a hand, stalling them, his smile thin. "See, Harlan, this ridge, that bar. It's all connected to my fields. Protection's a small fee. You vipers think you're knights, but oaths don't pay debts." The night air thickened, the crickets falling silent as if holding breath. Hawk's voice cut low, gravel over steel. "Your uncle sold us out for less, broke every code we lived by. You're walking his path, squeezing the weak to line your pockets, but we're done letting it slide." A distant engine whine answered, Jax and Lena, the vipers circling back from their scout, headlights blooming on the horizon like fireflies massing for war. Kane's men tensed, hands twitching toward hidden holsters, but he held steady, eyes narrowing at the approaching glow. Sophia stepped forward, her voice clear against the tension, laced with the moral fire she'd found in the day's choices. "It's not about money, Kane. It's about people, families like mine, broken by your games. Mia vanished because of crews like yours, pulling strings in the dark. Gus is talking to the sheriff, and we've got proof. That note in my place, whispers from the ERs. You push this and it all unravels. Walk away. Honor something for once." Kane's facade cracked, a flicker of rage in his eyes, the ghost of his bloodline's shame surfacing. He spat to the side, the sound sharp in the quiet. "Honor? You ride with relics, girl. The world's changed." But doubt crept in, his glance darting to the swelling viper lights. Now a dozen strong engines idling in a ring of chrome resolve. The roughnecks muttered, one backing toward the truck, the balance tipping like sand in an hourglass. Hawk extended a hand, not in threat but offer. "Last chance, Victor. Break the cycle. Your uncle's shadow don't have to be yours." The words hung, A bridge over the chasm of old grudges, the Viper convoy halting just beyond, a silent testament to chosen family. Cain hesitated, the weight of legacies pressing, then turned, barking at his men. "We're done here, for now." The trucks reversed, gravel crunching in retreat, tail lights fading into the night like retreating storms. Silence returned, broken only by the Vipers dismounting, Jax clapping Hawk's shoulder with a nod of approval. Lena pulled Sophia aside, her voice soft. "You faced him down like one of us. That's redemption starting." The group gathered on the porch, sharing water from canteens, the air easing into camaraderie. Stories swapped in low tones, bonds tightening like knots in rope. Hawk met Sophia's eyes across the fire pit's glow, the silver locket catching the flames. "You kept the oath alive tonight," he murmured later, as the others bedded down in tents strung across the ridge. "Mia's promise, it's not lost." Sophia leaned into him, the desert stars wheeling overhead, vast and unforgiving yet full of light. The confrontation had cracked her walls further, revealing a path not of escape, but confrontation with her past. Cain's retreat was no end, but a pivot. Justice morale, pursued through truth and unity, not fists. As the night deepened, the cabin's warmth enveloped them, whispers of tomorrow's rides mingling with the wind's sigh. Promises endured, weaving through the shadows, pulling them toward dawn's uncharted roads. The stars hung like scattered diamonds over the ridge, their cold light filtering through the canopy of Joshua trees, casting ethereal patterns on the cabin's weathered walls. The fire pit crackled softly, embers glowing like the remnants of a hard-fought day, as the Vipers settled into the night. Some sprawled on sleeping bags under the open sky, others murmuring around the flames, passing a thermos of strong coffee laced with the faint bitterness of shared trials. The air carried the earthy tang of cooling desert soil and the subtle smoke of burning mesquite, a scent that wrapped around Sophia like an old blanket, comforting in its familiarity. Cain's retreat lingered in the quiet, not as triumph but as a fragile peace, the kind earned through words sharper than any blade. Sophia sat on the porch steps, her knees drawn up, the faint scar on her jaw catching the fire's warm flicker. Hawk lowered himself beside her, his weight making the wood groan in quiet protest, the heat from his body a steady presence against the night's chill. The silver locket dangled from his keychain, swaying gently in the breeze, its viper emblem a symbol of oaths that had bridged their silent years. "You held the line tonight," he said, his voice a low rumble like the idling of a distant engine. "Faced down shadows most folks run from. That's more than survival, Sophia. That's honoring what matters." She turned to him, her grey eyes reflecting the stars, the storm clouds within them parting for the first time in ages. The day's revelations had peeled back layers she'd long buried. The note in her apartment, Cain's slithering threats, twisting Mia's memory into a weapon. But standing firm, backed by the Viper's unyielding circle, had reignited something dormant, the promise she'd made to her sister under a similar starry sky, years ago in a different life. "I thought I'd lost that part of me," she admitted, her words soft against the cricket chorus. "Pouring whiskey, keeping my head down. It was easier than chasing ghosts. But you saw through it. 5 years, and you never pushed. Why now?" Hawk's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the mesas loomed like silent guardians, their outlines softened by the moon's silver wash. He traced a calloused finger along the locket, the metal warm from the fire. "The road teaches patience, but it also shows you what slips away if you wait too long. My brother, he made me swear to watch for the ones carrying invisible loads. You were that for me, night after night, holding up that bar like it was the last stand. When those fools came in, it hit me. No more silence. The Vipers ride for promises like that. And now, you're part of it." Across the clearing, Jax and Lena shared a nod over the fire, their silhouettes etched in orange light, Two souls bound by the club's code. Lena's steady hands once saving lives in makeshift field hospitals. Jax's unerring sense of direction guiding them through more than just backroads. The others, veterans like Marcus, with his quiet laugh that hid battlefield echoes, and young Tyler, fresh from his own redemption arc, formed a tapestry of chosen kin, their leathers a uniform of loyalty forged in loss. They weren't flawless. Scars ran deep, from wars abroad to personal reckonings at home. But in this moment, under the vast Nevada sky, they were unbreakable, a family woven from threads of honor and quiet sacrifice. Sophia felt the pull of it, a warmth spreading through her chest like dawn's first rays. The cabin behind them hummed with potential, not just shelter, but a starting point, its rooms waiting to echo with new stories. She thought of her apartment's emptiness, the laundromat's endless spin, the bar's neon haze that had dimmed her days. Gus's call earlier had confirmed the wheels turning, reports filed. The sheriff's office stirring under pressure from credible voices, Kane's empire cracking at the edges without a single shot fired. Justice, poetic and measured, unfolding through truth rather than fury, a moral victory that honored the vulnerable, the forgotten. As the fire popped, sending sparks skyward like fleeting prayers, Hawk stood, offering his hand. "Come inside. Dawn's not far, and we've got roads to map." She took it, her fingers lacing with his, the connection solid, electric with unspoken futures. The cabin's interior wrapped around them in soft lamplight, the scent of pine from the walls mingling with fresh brewed tea on the stove. They sat at the table, the map from earlier smoothed out, now marked with new lines, not of conflict but possibility. Routes to Reno, where old leads on Mia might still whisper safe houses for those Kane's reach had touched, Viper chapters ready to extend their shield. Hours slipped by in hushed conversation, plans blooming like wildflowers after rain, Sophia suggesting ways to aid the bar's regulars, families squeezed by the oil baron's greed, Hawk outlining the club's network, a web of loyalty spanning states. By the time the first light crept through the windows, gilding the valley in rose and gold, exhaustion tugged at them, but so did hope. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder, the rhythm of his breathing syncing with her own. "This is home," she murmured, the word tasting new, unburdened. Hawk pressed a kiss to her temple, his beard rough against her skin. "It's the start. Promises kept. 1 mile at a time." Outside, the Vipers stirred, engines coughing to life in the crisp morning air, a convoy forming not for battle but brotherhood, a ride to town, to stand witness as the sheriff's lights flashed at Kane's gates, truth prevailing in the light of day. As the sun crested fully, bathing the ridge in warmth, Sophia mounted the Harley behind Hawk, her arms secure around him, the wind rising to greet them. The desert stretched endless, a canvas of redemption, where old silences gave way to shared horizons. Mia's ghost lingered, not as torment, but guide, a vow renewed in the roar of engines and the unbreakable bond of chosen family. They rode into the light, legacies honored, the road ahead whispering of justice won and hearts mended. Thank you for riding along on this journey of quiet promises and unbreakable loyalty. If these tales of redemption touch your soul, hit that subscribe button and join the crew. We've got more stories revving up on the horizon.